And also, I have special dispensation to lose the jacket. Those of you who are watching from abroad, this is the hottest week of the year so far in Britain. Thank you very much, Steve. Change of mood, you weren't going to have it earlier, but never mind, thank you for that. I'm not doing that, he said. Good afternoon. That's to those of you here in the church and those of you around the world watching the stream of today's event. As we've just heard from Pauline, one of Bernie's ambitions was to join the RAF. And as we know, as best he could, he kept up his flying hours. And on quite a few occasions, he and I flew out of Fair Oaks Airport, which is inches away, but I have no idea in which direction. But it's very near here anyway. And that was in a plane owned by the London Transport Flying Club. And you guys, I know some of you are here today, you were just so friendly to the two of us. I'm proud to say that Bernie was a friend of mine, as I'm sure lots of you are. And obviously to some of you, like Pauline, Charlie, Rebecca and Robin, he was a lot more than that. But the turnout here and online is testament to the fact that to pretty well everyone he came into contact with, Bernie was at the very least a friend, because that's what he was like. Now, for those of you who don't know or haven't worked it out yet, I'm the National Lottery's voice of the balls and the voice of Strictly Come Dancing. The launch show is coming up in a few days' time on BBC One. And that, sorry, Pauline, that was a shameless trail. Because that's what we used to do. That's what I sort of got involved in television for, really. I was in the radio most of my life with the likes of Terry Wogan, but moving to Television Centre on a few evenings a week was good fun with the likes of Benie Newnham and Pauline Langfield. That's how I met them. We were trailing, promoting BBC TV programmes on BBC One and BBC Two. And if you need any more evidence, Thursday night on BBC One begins with Top of the Pops. Then at 7:30, there's Trouble at the Queen Vic in EastEnders. That's how I got into your brain many years ago. And let's face it, there was always trouble at the Queen. There was always trouble at the Queen Vic, Ian. Always. How we got those things recorded, I have absolutely no idea, because we were in fits of laughter, particularly Pauline and I. Bernie was his usual calm, unflappable self, because that's how he was. Previously, as we've heard, he'd been a cameraman working on live TV shows like Breakfast Time, and had been working in presentation, producing not just promotions, but also shows like Points of View with Anne Robinson. And you know, it's not the usual thing for a voiceover artist like me to do, but I did indeed go flying with Bernie. We both had an interest in planes, so off we went into the wide blue yonder now and again. We talked about life, the universe, and everything. But then there were the silences, and they're a good test of a friendship. None of them was particularly awkward. Friends don't need to fill the gaps. We were happy with each other's company. That and the need to focus on looking out for other aircraft across, which is an important job to do. Anyway, enough about me. What about Mr. Newnham? Come on. I have to say, a lot of you have said so many nice things about Bernie over the last few weeks. The family have been overwhelmed. Don't get me wrong, I'm not the greatest fan of social media. I've had nothing to do with Facebook since I discovered you expected to like people. But it's at times like this that it really does come into its own. And Bernie is classically someone who benefits from being somewhere where people can be nice. I too have the wristband, ladies and gentlemen. As Pauline reminded me the other day, it was one of his favourite sayings, just be nice. And since the news spread of his having left us, people have done just that. Now, I promise not to go on too long, and sorry if it's yours, if yours isn't one of the tributes I read at, but the outpouring of emotion for our dear departed friend has been exceptional. Like this from John Barlow, once head of cameras at BBC Television, which outlines Bernie's career at the BBC rather nicely. He says, I've just read the news about Bernie. I knew that he'd been very poorly for some time, but it still comes as a shock to hear that he's no longer with us. I knew Bernie throughout his days as a cameraman and, of course, when he moved into presentation. Totally professional, he was the epitome of excellence in all things TV. Actually, not just TV, he taught me basic plumbing skills and gave me the confidence to install my own central heating system. It was this enthusiasm to explain and guide those with less experience and skills that naturally led him into his work after the BBC, lecturing undergraduate students and then being a founder member of the Institute for Training in Television Production. And of course, the Tech Ops website, carries on John, was Bernie's creation, and it remains the principal way that those of us now looking back on our TV careers keep in touch with each other. And how true is that? He really will be so terribly missed by those fortunate enough to have rubbed shoulders with him. Well, thank you, John. Congratulations on that. That's done a better job of summing up Bernie's career than I could ever have done, to be honest. Now, if you don't know the Benie Newnham story, it is on the Tech Ops website. I can give you the link after this celebration if you want. It's typical Bernie, to be honest. Nicely self-effacing with a rich vein of humour running right through it, as he takes you from the early years in Tufnell Park and Watford through to realising at the age of 15 that it was a BBC cameraman that he wanted to be. Through sheer determination, he made it to the BBC's training establishment at Evesham in Worcestershire. From there was no looking back. Unwittingly, he drifted into the heyday, and it was the heyday of British television, working eventually on shows such as Top of the Pops, The Oneidin Line, Softly Softly, Doom Watch, Nationwide, and Jackanory. What an incredible range of shows, though. One of the shifts he worked on as cameraman involved helping the BBC's presentation department. And as I said earlier, one of the jobs they do is making trails for programmes that need promoting. It wasn't long before Mr. Newnham thought, I wouldn't mind having a go at that, you know. And as an assistant producer, he qualified for a free colour telly, so why not? So off to Prez, as it was called, he went, and he did very well. It was also where he met his lovely wife. Mind you, this is written in Pauline's writing, this bit. Bernie went on to do a whole range of things for BBC television, including Points of View. He invented the broom cupboard for children's BBC and even got to be Roland Ratt's right hand live on BBC One. How many of us can say that? Not many people know that. Also on the Tech Ops website, Bernie tells us about his retiring 3 times, how his interest in new technology really paid off, and how when he turned freelance, being nice and people liking working with him meant some of those contacts proved really useful on more than one occasion. As I'm sure you can imagine, the family had been swamped with emails about one of the nicest people in the business. So let's take a look at some of them. And as you'll hear, doing so sheds more light on some of the things that he got up to. He was such an important and generous person in the lives of so many people. You'll hear that many times over, I'm sure, says one of them. He'll be missed terribly. He was such a live wire and a mass of incredible knowledge. Always interesting, never dull. Even though it was undoubtedly the blessed release you mentioned, it's still painful to hear the reality that we've lost such a good friend who will be sadly missed by so many. Someone else says here, I've spent much time in the last weeks thinking about the significant influence he'd been on the video production group over the last several years. He gave his enthusiasm, ideas, experience in equal measure. We shall miss him greatly. And Bernie's video production group was an inspiration to all of us, aged students in the U3A. His ongoing positive outlook, enthusiasm and hard work resulted in some really high-quality output being produced, which is good news. Someone else says, this is very sad news. Bernie will be missed by all his fellow pilots at the club. I shall miss him a lot, says someone else, even though I've only known him relatively few years, but during that time he's taught me a lot and been such a good friend. For the short time that we knew Bernie, he brought joy, knowledge, and his unique way of seeing the world. We'll miss him and his enthusiasm. And again here, I'm not the only one who will mourn the loss. Bernie was a dear colleague for many years. It seems so long ago now. He was one of my trainees in Prez and always did argue the toss. He's probably still doing it where he is now, says this correspondent. I have fond memories of Bernie in Prez, always a stalwart and amiable with a wry sense of humour. He was a pleasure to work with. I hope you and the family know how he was respected. Bernie was such an influence on my life. He was patient and conducted himself with good humour and integrity. He was a great professional who I greatly admired. You've done very well to have been together for so many years, says this individual, but for the right reasons. Also very lucky to have found someone so special. For the 3 years I worked in Prez, says this person here, before leaving to work for the newly established satellite TV sports channel, we can almost work out who it is, can't we? Which was based much closer to my home. He was such an inspiration. And then Bernie and I came to the Prez department at the same time back in 1977. He was a great help to me as I was moving from local radio in Brighton. To have someone with such a wealth of knowledge, not just about the technicalities of television, but the layout of Television Centre itself was a real bonus. Good days. Thank you, Bernie, for your encouragement and patience. Although it's been a long time since we all worked together, those are the happy, fun times we'll never forget. Yours has been a wonderful marriage, says this person here. Two lovely, caring folk who cared not just for each other, but also for everyone they encountered. Bernie was a very special man, one of the best mentors and encouragers for others. He was a colleague whom I not only admired and respected, but more importantly, I was privileged to know him as a friend. And then someone else says here, Bernie was the backbone of the press department. I worked in that between 77 and 81. He just was press, so very good at everything he did. Ask Bernie would inevitably result in good advice or a workable solution to a problem, whether technical or artistic. Single line here, sad news, Pauline, of a wonderful gentleman and the end of an era. I only knew Bernie in his latter years, but liked him very much and admired his work. Rest assured that there are those of us who spend our lives truffling through tapes of old telly and will still remember him when an old Points of View comes up. Signed, Anne Robinson. Is that right? You don't know me. I'm a writer, actor and researcher who's benefited so much from Bernie's help over the years. He was such a nice man. He did a brilliant job on a Doctor Who DVD commentary I did with him a year or so ago. Bernie did so many things. The feedback was excellent, and I loved doing it with him. And part of the same group says he was always very helpful whenever I asked him about past BBC employees. And with the Doctor Who in Memoriam video, I do every year. And now he'll be sadly featuring in the next one. I just wanted to send you my condolences and very best wishes. I know I speak for an awful lot of people you've neither met nor heard of when I say that he was valued by a whole community of classic TV lovers who appreciated his work and his help. He won't be forgotten. Bernie was one of the best, but I'm sure you know that. What he did, both whilst working at the BBC and afterwards, will be something that many of us will always appreciate. Someone else says, Bernie was a lovely man, so kind. I remember when you two got married. I do hope have happy memories of your life together, and that will bring you some comfort. I don't think I ever worked with Bernie, but I just wanted to send you my best wishes and to let you know you are in my thoughts. What a lovely thing to do. Everyone has very lovely things to say about him, and in running this email group, he's kept so many of us in touch. He always seems to have been there at the centre of things, keeping us all informed and holding us all together as a group since back in the 1980s, when one by one we released our grips on Pres and the special family support it gave us. I have so valued being among the recipients of his work, and his not being there suddenly seems a real loss. Bernie was a great guy, and we all admired his capabilities and generosity. I knew him less than others, knowing his brother Steve more at work. Rivalry crops up again, Stephen. We must do something about that. But Bernie became the one I really admired at the end of the Pres career. Watch my jacket disappear now. I knew Bernie when I worked in VT at Television Centre in the 1980s when he was on Points of View. He was someone you could rely on to be chatty, in a good mood when he came into the office, something that couldn't be said for a few sports PAs. Just a bit of inside joke there about sports PAs, bit of rivalry. I always enjoyed the occasions when we got together, either at the Pres get-togethers or at RGS. He will most definitely be missed. Like so many who passed through the Pres doors, I benefited from his wisdom, humour, kindness and patience, though I'm sure I tested all of them. I know who that is as well. Mr. Gibbons. Right, so, I said I wouldn't name people, but sometimes you have to. Oh, here we go. If ever there was a true broadcasting polymath, that's a person of wide knowledge or learning. I had to look it up myself. It was Bernie. As the next trainee Pres PA off the studio floor after me, I learned how some of the then Pres management treated the OU qualifications he'd earned, as if they hardly counted. It had been Rowan Ayres who overrode others in letting me in, and maybe I'd helped when it was Bernie's turn. All water under the bridge because Bernie's sheer common sense and ability to put down the marker for his being respected and reckoned with. We're almost there, folks. Bernie was a genuinely lovely man. He was so kind, funny and patient, and I know I wasn't the only one who was pleased to see him when he walked into the room, because you knew your day was about to get better. I learned so much from him about how to do my job and how to treat my colleagues. Bernie was such an inspirational figure from Pres days, infectiously enthusiastic, generous with his time and kind. Someone else says I'd worked with him at TVC many years ago, but didn't really get to meet him properly until I joined the Tech Op. Disorganized lunches. He was always friendly and very welcoming, and I was most grateful for the time he spent keeping everyone in touch with each other. Here's a nice one. How kind he was to me when I was blundering my way through a 6-month stint of directing Open Air. you remember that program with Eamon Holmes? With zero training or support. Bernie was literally the only person who helped me on his own initiative. And it definitely wasn't his responsibility. He booked a studio for a couple of hours to give me some practical tuition, as this didn't occur to anyone higher up the ranks. He really, really helped me out, and to this day I'm extremely grateful for his kindness and professionalism. He was a lovely human being. I knew Bernie from my early beekeeping days. Who knew? Some years ago now, his hands-off, thoughtful, considered style of beekeeping was a welcome relief and antidote to the many rules and timetables, perhaps a reflection of other aspects of life. I have fond memories of Bernie, it says here, and worked with him a lot over the years. He was always very generous and helped so many people reach their potential. I always had a great respect and admiration for Bernie. He was such a powerhouse at TVC and yet was always ready to have a chat. I worked in Pres a lot with Bernie during my early sound supervisor days. Everybody wants to get in with a word about Bernie. It's always a pleasure when he was running the show, so competent and so professional. He made it a lot of fun. Bernie was always a fixer, a maker and a doer back in the Pres days. He was one of the nicest blokes around and somebody you could rely on to make things happen. What's more, I was really pleased when I heard that you two had got together. He was such an interesting and helpful man and a fountain of knowledge on all things to do with video production. And I learned so much from him in our video classes. We both got to know each other during our time with BBC Smart and subsequently at various lunches. I'll remember him as a very clever and friendly person who was full of ideas and really enjoyed life. There are so many of these, ladies and gentlemen. My happiest memory of working with him was the night Apollo 13 blew up. Bernie was still a cameraman. A 4-man discussion was set up in Pres A. Bernie operated 2 cameras and I operated the 3rd, all under the direction of the shy retiring Pat Hubbard. Happy days, they say, happy days. And finally, there's this one. I could read ever so many, but time is pressing. Bernie's site has been a source of inspiration, interest and information for many people and organisations over the years. And we're all so grateful for Bernie's inspiration and vision in setting it up. Without that site, so much of the history of BBC television in the last half of the 20th century would never have been collected. It would simply have been lost for all time. And they sign off this email with, "All hail to Bernie, cut to black, thank you, studio." The principal memory I shall cling on to myself was that unlike quite a few people within the business we call show, Bernie did indeed have integrity, a word defined by the Oxford English Dictionary as the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. And you know, you can sum up Bernie's life and impact on this world in just 8 words, the very same 8 words that Pauline used to round off her note to everyone on the Tech Ops website mailing list when she told us all that Bernie was no longer with us. If you didn't know Bernie, you missed out.